You're listening to The Outcue, a 21 News journalist perspective on a top news story.
Good afternoon. I'm Assistant News Director Justin Mitchell, and this is The Outcue. Now, as many of you know, The Outcue has various aspects of the news industry that we like to take a look behind the scenes at, because what's behind the scenes is where all the sausage is made and where you see the difference between what you might see somebody just tweet out on social media versus all of the work that goes into actual journalism and actual news gathering and how it all gets to you in a way that is factual, truthful, and well vetted and properly vetted. And it also has to look a certain way and has to be visually interesting and it has to be written a certain way. And I'm rattling all of this off because all of this goes through one person who, as it's about to hit the air, sits at the helm and steers that ship home, and you never think about them and you don't know what they do. And that's the producer. And so with me today is a longtime producer with 21 News, is Rachel Kerr. Or should I say Rachel Kerr? I should say, the schedule still says Rachel Kerr.
Yeah, you can say either, because I tend to do professional name is Rachel Kerr, and then my married name is Rachel Kerr Bung. So okay. Either is fine.
So Rachel, you've been with us since what year?
Oh gosh, it's been almost 10 years. So
they get harder
2014. Yeah, it's kind of blurred together over the time.
And that's in part because there's so much information that comes at you that every day can feel like a couple years. We do this all the time where we're saying, well, reference that one story that happened when? That was a couple months ago, right? And it is years.
Yes, yeah. And then sometimes it just feels like yesterday for you too. Yeah.
Oh, especially the big ones. The real big ones, I recall as if they just happened.
Yeah.
So Rachel, you interned here first, right?
Yes.
And then you started as a part-time producer probably, right?
Yes.
You were part-time for a while.
Yeah. So I interned here twice. And then it's a funny story. I met Mona, the previous news director, when I was working in a consignment shop and it's a journalism major. And she just was like, oh, you're so interested in this. And hey, why don't you come intern at 21 News? So I did twice, really enjoyed it. And then started working here as a part-time producer.
And so let's talk about what that means. Because do you find, we were talking a little bit before we started here, that no one on the outside has any idea what it is we really do for a living? They just know that we work for the news.
Yeah.
So a producer's day begins many, many hours before the newscast is on. And what are there's things you guys do that will never even make sense to anybody who doesn't sit there and do it, including myself.
Yeah.
But let's try and decode it as best as we can.
Okay. So I think too, and like a lot of producers, I think more in written thought. So this is all new for me to be in front of the camera as opposed to behind it. So I have my little notes here. If I'm looking down, but
because we're a visual medium, so people don't think producers are thinking visually, but they write.
It's really a kind of cool balancing act that you have to do is think visually and also think context-wise and think how you were going to say what you're going to say, all to kind of make it interesting as well. You want to, depending on who you're working with too, in the morning, if we have a news director there or you have your talent there, then it can be kind of a cohesive process where everybody gets involved. But sometimes it is just you, and you come in to start your day, look and see what's going on in the news, look and see what's happening, and kind of decide, okay, what's, much with news gathering for any other journalist, what's the big story of the day? What's the thing that people need to know about the most? And then just kind of go from there.
Well, and I think we skipped ahead on your time here because you started as an intern. We talked about how you got hired, and then we didn't talk about what you've done since then.
Oh.
So, and that's my fault.
Yeah.
But you spent how many years on the morning show?
Gosh, 6 to 7 years on the morning show. I would work overnight and gather news overnight and kind of piece it all together.
And that's coming in at 11,
yeah,
right?
yeah, that's coming in at 11 at night, every night. And again, kind of seeing like what, because you're thinking constantly to the next day. Like my Monday would be somebody else's Sunday. So like you were always a day ahead of what was going to happen. And then you had to still kind of stay in the present as well too, just for your daily life. But yeah, so I would plan out what was going to air in the morning and what people needed to know when they first got up. And a lot of that was gathering news, kind of on my own, because we didn't have stuff overnight. And that's common for most news industries to not have people overnight with you as a producer. So you would gather the news yourself nationally, locally. If it was like a big situation that happened overnight, I was the one making the calls and talking to like, police officers, like officials, whoever was involved in whatever situation, and then piecing together a story so that when our reporters and our anchors would come in the morning, they would just have that ready to go because they're not here to craft that by themselves. And so in that one story, I have to think of, okay, what's really happening? How can I say this in a way that is engaging to someone, in a way that is not out of the realm of what they can understand in terms of like when police officers speak and different things like that. They use different codes and different forms of language that most people don't hear on a daily basis. Cop speak. Yes, yes, yeah, like Law and Order, stuff like that. And to do that and to do that in a way that's kind of engaging and can capture a viewer's attention and keep it. And then we're also thinking of visual components. Well, what graphics would look good with this? And we're doing that for not just one story, but every single story that goes into a show, which could be anywhere from half an hour to I was doing 2 hours. So it really depends.
And so then from the morning show, you've also, as everybody's done a lot of different jobs,
Yes.
you've filled in on other shows.
Yes.
So now that was the way you have to look ahead mindset.
Mm-hmm.
How does that differ from, say, the 6 o'clock news?
The 6 o'clock news is a lot of, well, what's happening right now? What's happening not only just today, but like right this moment that people need to know about, as opposed to, which is carrying throughout all news. It's kind of right now. But the morning show, it was more like, okay, what's happening right now, but also what is going to happen throughout your day up until noon, midday, that you need to know about, that you need to know as you go about and do your business. Whereas the 6 o'clock news, people are pretty much getting off work, coming home, and they're like, okay, well, what happened that I might have missed, but also what's going on right now? What's the big thing?
So now, one thing I've noticed, and I'm curious how you work this into that workflow, is that, there was a time where what you saw on, say, the 6 o'clock news was a recap of everything you missed during the day. But now people get their news digitally, and so they will know more about what's happened during the day than you're even going to be able to fit into the newscast. So it's got to be more about bringing context to it. And I'd like you to just talk a little bit about how that's evolved and how you have to think about presenting that information.
I think it's evolved over time. Is like you said, it was just a recap. It was just kind of, here's what went on, and that was it. Because people didn't have digital media and like your phone instantly giving you everything that's happening as it happens. So now, to me, the 6 o'clock news is more about, well, how can we make what just happened either relatable to the viewer, or how does it relate to the viewer, and like what from it, what kind of value are they going to get from whatever it is that happened.
And you can go deeper in depth with it too. I mean, there was a time we've been able to do a lot more deeper dive kinds of stories, in part because of exactly that. That there are things, if it's just something that doesn't require an explanation, it's just this happened, you report that this happened. But you can do that online.
Yeah, exactly.
So the newscast is allowed to breathe a little more. Now, from a technical standpoint, how much, I mean, so we talked a little bit about writing, but it's more than, I mean, you're pretty much nonstop from the second you walk in. one of our longtime veteran producers used to talk about how it was a luxury to complete a thought, and that he would reward himself by being able to finally run to the restroom.
Yes, yes, yeah. So, and I wasn't sure how we were getting into that, but yeah, no. Especially when I worked overnights, when I was doing like 2-hour program, it was like I would have timers on my phone to be like, okay, I know I have to get this much news done within this amount of time, and then this amount of time, and then this amount of time, and then maybe right here I could pee if I get this all finished by this time. And then, I would miss eating, things like that. And that's the nature of like news in general. Like you'll know, not just producing, but producing is like everything that you do is down to the second.
Yeah, we don't take lunch breaks
No.
and things like that. We just are go, go, go.
Yeah.
We eat, we find ways to
Yeah.
adapt. We're doing fine.
Yeah.
Don't worry about us.
We're okay. I promise.
But it is the kind of thing that you've got to be a different kind of an animal to
Yes.
really, I mean, you're on a treadmill set to 10 and it's
Yeah.
not, and you don't have a stop button.
It really is. And I think too, like a different kind of an animal, you have to have a vested interest in what you're doing. And you have to love what you're doing to do this, And I think there's a perception about when somebody hears the word producer, they're thinking like either for like a movie or like worst case scenario reality TV. Like, oh, those producers make them do like awful things and this and that. And like the producers are the enemy, and like that's not what we go into it wanting to be or even doing, especially in news. The reality is we're balancing, the best product in terms of like it being like that, but also like we're journalists first, and so we want to bring you what's happening, like the actual facts. We have a passion for that too, but then make it in a way that is engaging and empathetic and in a way that like viewers can kind of resonate with.
And you're really visual storytellers.
Yes.
And that's not, I mean, people understand writing. People understand how to tell a story, if you've got unlimited space and can just write forever.
Yes.
And some people are better at it than others. But writing for TV is a whole other beast.
Oh, it is.
You've got to get the point across in fewer words.
Yes.
Stories are sometimes 15 to 20 seconds long. Because we're not talking about the reporter-driven packages here. We're talking about the stuff that you're writing, things we call VOs and VOSOTs, voiceover and voiceover with sound on tape. The stuff the anchors read, they help with, but you're the one who's organizing that. You're writing a lot of it. We call it stacking the show.
Yes.
I mean, talk about that. What's Remember, we're talking about something that's so foreign to anybody who hasn't been in a newsroom.
Yeah, it's basically like producers would say, like, it's like you're on a train. And like as soon as you get in to when you are stacking your show and as you get that done, it doesn't end like when the show is stacked. You have to go up and like, okay, now this is all down, like my news is in, my graphics, how it's going to look is in, what the anchors are going to say or are supposed to say is in. It doesn't end. You go up to our control room where, we look like producers then. We have the headset on, we have the little microphone, and we're like, okay, telling everybody what to do. And you are constantly communicating with people on the set and who are out remotely at different venues and different places around the valley, bringing the news to us.
Tell me about a time, and I'm sure you can think of many, so don't no pressure. But like when we were talking about the morning show and how a lot of that would be done, you're here by yourself for a lot of it.
Yes.
And then there comes a point where you're on the air and management is always reachable, but we're not here yet.
Yeah.
And say you've got somebody out doing some light featurey live shot and then something big happens and you've got to make a call right now. I'm sure you've got examples of that.
Several. And that's the thing is they all blend together after a while because there's several. But no, I know we've had situations where that's happened and you're like, you have to just almost go with your gut. And it's hard because like when there is something that happens right before the show goes to air, you're like, okay, is this going to be over by the time it airs? Is it not? You know, is this a situation where we're going to go live? Like there's all of that that goes through your mind in restructuring a show that it took you like 6 hours to do for a 2-hour program. And then you're like, you know what? It is what it is. It is what it has to be. So we're going to pull this person from alive and have them go out,
But you have
wherever
to,
it is.
you have to really know that it's
Yes.
worth doing that.
Yes, exactly.
So what's the tipping point there? I mean, look,
Yeah.
we know that there are lots of texts
Yeah.
from the morning web people who, and I say people as if there's not one guy we have in mind, who diligently is on the scanners and digging up news, and he's a beast for that.
Yes.
So he wants to make sure you're informed of everything you might be missing while you're up in the control room. But it doesn't mean that we have eyes on scene.
Yes.
And you've got limited resources. So what's it take to know it's time to scrap that live and you're not going to ruin your show when they go to check something out that turned out to be nothing?
That turned out to be nothing. Sometimes you do have to risk that, which kind of, you know, it sucks, but like that's the nature of the beast. But a lot of it is after dealing with news so long, it's going to sound like a cop-out, but it's not. It's a gut feeling. Like you just know, okay, this sounds like this is going to be a big deal. This sounds immediate. This feels wrong, like that we're here right now. So we have to go there.
Sometimes you can tell things by even the tone of a voice.
Yes.
You know, in this, whether it be a call you took or something you heard on a scanner.
Yeah.
Something's off.
Yeah.
So no, it
Yes.
really, it does not sound like a cop out.
Yeah.
It's everybody's got something that's their area of expertise, and they
Yeah.
can just kind of tell something's off.
Something's off. And then I think that goes with the kind of, you have to, not to like toot our own horns, but you have to kind of be a special person to want to be in this field. And I think a lot of people that have that gut feeling a lot and can kind of react that way.
It's being curious.
Yes.
And it is, but there is a certain level of, you know, gutsiness you have to have, because like you said, you've just put 6 hours putting a show together.
Yeah.
And now you're going to roll the dice that you might throw it all out. And it's going to be a better broadcast if I'm getting news that we have to get out there.
Yes.
But if I come up snake eyes, I better have a plan B.
Yes.
And that plan B is not going to be what I wanted it to be, but it
Yes.
better also still be good.
Yes, and that's what, so when you stack a show, it's so hard to explain when it's visual, but you'll have every single line of like, this is a story, story A, story B, story C. So if I'm like, okay, story C, I have for a morning show, I have Nicole live. She's somewhere like at a coffee shop, and I have a, you know, large fire or something going on that I'm like, this is not good. You know, we have to be there. I will pull her and then try to figure out timing wise where to put her in the show later. And then if say her live at that coffee house was like 2.5 minutes, I'm like, okay, you know what, that's fine. I just got to figure out how to fill that out somewhere else in the show.
But easier said than done. I
Easy-
mean, like
yeah.
we just said, you know, a lot of stories
Yeah.
are 15 to 20 seconds.
Yes, yes.
So to the viewer, you hear, oh, fill 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, big deal. It's 2.5
Yeah,
minutes.
they're like, whatever.
2.5 minutes when you're watching television is much longer than
Yes.
you realize.
Yes.
Much longer than you realize.
And I would think, like, compare it to like 2.5 minutes of waiting for something, like waiting at like a government office or waiting or whatever. You're gonna feel that 2.5 minutes. Yeah.
Staring at the microwave.
Staring at the microwave. Yes.
And
Like,
by the way, there's people watching you
Yes,
who want that
yes,
microwave. It's
yes.
like that.
yes, it is. It is like I can't, come on, let's go. You'll feel that 2.5 minutes, and that's how long it really is.
Yeah, yeah. So now, after all those years on the morning show, now finally you get to see daylight sometimes.
Yes.
And your title, which I didn't say at the start of this now, is Coordinating Producer.
Yes.
So this is a little, I don't know, I hope you like it.
Yeah. No, I
but it's a little bit more of an oversight
Yeah.
position where you're able to help younger producers with a lot of different things, among other things. I mean,
Yeah.
because there's no way to describe anything any of us do in a single sentence.
Yeah.
But talk about that evolution and what you do now
Yeah.
to assist them and to come up with new ways to present
Ways
news.
to do things. So what I kind of do now is just taking everything that I've learned over the years of how to deal with problems when they come up on the air, which is really scary, or like behind the scenes, and pass that knowledge on to them. And then what we're also doing too is when it comes to like story elements visually, they'll go, oh, well, I don't really know what this is going to look like. I don't know what graphic to put behind this person. I don't know what kind of feel I want for this. I'm like, okay, well, why don't we try this? And a lot of times we'll come up with really cool and interesting ways to do something that we've not done before. And that's kind of what I want to do too, is always just, what have we not done before? What can we try? You
Yes,
know?
trying
And-
things.
yes.
It's okay to throw
Yes.
things against the wall sometimes. And no, they won't all work. But we'll know that they didn't work.
Yeah.
It becomes a problem when it's repeated if
Yes.
it didn't work and
Yes.
it does work.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, that's a
Oh,
win.
yeah.
That's a win.
We had not too long ago. It was I'm trying to think of what it was because I was off for a little bit. But it was new planes that had come to
Yeah.
Yars. Yeah, and we were trying to think of how to do, because you come out from a show to like your anchors, they introduce themselves, and we're like, what could we do that would look really cool, that would be different, you know? But still, like, we want to show the plane right away, but we also have to show the people on TV. So I was talking to, I think it was Grace who was doing the 6 that day. And I was like, okay, well, why don't we have the video first and then come out to a double box, which is you have an anchor on one side and then you have whatever you want on the other side. So we would have that video. So it'd kind of pull back gently and you would see both of them. And she's like, yeah, let's try that. So we talked to our technical guys and they're like, well, we've never done that before. We're going to have to make that. I'm like, okay, see, make this possible, please. And we did, and it worked, and it felt really good to be able to do something like that.
And stuff like that,
Yeah.
what you just said, is, I mean, even for me, who's been in news a long time, wrapping my head around that
Yeah.
thought process is nearly impossible because I take for granted what I see on TV sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, just because like as you're describing what the double box is,
Yeah.
people at home don't necessarily realize
Yeah.
that, you know, you think of watching the news as there's an anchor, they sit there, they read things, then they show some video.
Yep.
But it's not that. It's
No.
there's images behind them,
Yes.
and there's images that are in front of them sometimes, or that
Yeah.
cover over them. And there's where the reporter, if the reporter's out live somewhere, where they're standing, and what that looks like, and how far the camera is from their
Yeah.
face, and yeah, the double box, or how to do a graphic that is going to make sense, and the fact that if there's even if the imagery is a little bit off, is it a
Yeah.
little bit harder to read, and somebody's
Yeah.
got to think about all of that.
There are so many nuances to it that you kind of pick up over time, and that I have a different background sometimes than some other producers. So like I was a journalism major, but I was also graphic arts and then creative writing as well. So it's like you kind of tap into everything that you know and you've experienced in life to be like, okay, how do I get somebody's attention and say, hey, this is important, pay attention, you know, and then make it interesting too.
So not to throw, well, you
Yeah.
know what, I have a couple more, and then we
Yeah.
can wrap up because I don't
Yeah.
want to, that we could go forever and ever.
okay.
But and one of them will maybe be a little bit of a curveball, so we'll see.
Okay.
But it's really just theorizing. So first, I just want to know. So all of this is obviously the news is on
Yes.
at the same time.
Yes.
There's no way you're always ready.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens when the broadcast is hitting the air
Yes.
now,
Yes.
and all those little timers? All, you know, best laid
Yeah.
plans of mice and men, right?
Yeah.
Like you just, something happens, you're off,
Yes.
and you've got to go on the air.
Yeah.
Besides panic, What do you do? Like they used to say, Lauren Michaels used to say about Saturday Night Live, like we don't go on because we're ready. We go on because it's 11:30.
Yes, yeah. So the first word you said, and internally you're going to be screaming. You do not panic. You do not panic. It is hard not to, but you have to be calm so that everybody around you is calm. So if something happens, you're just like, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this, and it's going to be fine, guys. And you have to kind of maintain that sense of control and calmness, and everybody around you is like, yeah, it's going to be all right. Everything's cool. And then you kind of build everything up from there and get the train that is derailed back on the tracks.
So, I mean, not to put a complex in your head, but are you thinking about all the people who are watching at that moment, or do you not?
You have to, but you have to distance yourself from that a tiny bit and be like, I used to have a mantra after every show, which was, no one was hurt because of us. We're not getting sued. And nobody at home could tell that things didn't go exactly as I wanted them to.
Yes.
And if all three of those things were met, then it was a perfect day.
Yeah.
As perfect as you could get.
Sometimes they can tell.
Sometimes they can tell. Yes, sometimes they can tell. And the recovery from that is how you kind of can tell between a producer who's really experienced at what they're doing and then someone who's just also learning, and you kind of learn from mistakes like that.
Yeah.
And some of it's out of your hands. Like the power could just go out and you're like, well, okay, we're somehow still, broadcasting somewhere, but we don't have any, we're sitting in black. Or our graphics could fail due to a technical glitch, which we've had. We've had a situation where we had no video and it failed on air, a couple of years ago. And we're like, what do we do? And everybody's like, what do we do, Rach? I'm like, okay, we're going to keep going is what we're going to do. We're the news. We're going to deliver the news. That's what we do. And it was like, okay, now I'm talking to the anchors to calm them down. I'm talking to the people remotely who have no idea what's happening back at the station to calm them down and let them know what's going on. And then I'm talking to our technical directors to be like, hey, we're actually going to take this camera shot, do this, so that people, they're going to know that there's no graphics, but it'll still be as visually interesting as we can do right now, and to give your anchors chances to breathe. Because a lot of the video that we had too would be anchor-led packages where someone else is doing the talking and they have a chance to breathe. Well, we don't have those anymore. So
all of this sounds so very, very stressful. But do you like it?
Yeah. Oh no, I wouldn't. That's the thing. I wouldn't be coming back if I didn't. It's. Yeah, I love what I do. I genuinely do, and that's the thing too. Is there's so many different elements of being a producer that I like. That is like anywhere from like being nosy and knowing what's going on in the world and locally, to the visual aspects of it, to when something does go wrong, it's almost like a game. Like, okay, what can I do to get this back on track?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be doing anything else.
How do you see, this is the one that's a little bit of a curveball, but it's not too bad.
Okay.
So we talked a little bit about the evolution of how people consume the news from what it used to be to the way they do it now. That's not the end of an evolutionary cycle.
No.
We're right in the middle of one. So where do you see traditional broadcast news heading? And in 10 years, 20 years?
See, I think the fear is that like tech is going to kind of be the downfall of TV. But I don't think that it is, and I don't think that it has to be. I think a lot of what we're doing now, as far as like news and producing, is we're kind of embracing that, right? Like, hey, okay, we had this segment. We went, as in depth as we can in like, say, a minute 22 minutes. But if you want more, go to our website, go to our app. And we're also doing this really cool thing now that I like, where we have QR codes with different stories that we can post online. So if it's something related to, say we're doing some sort of campaign and it's like to help with say it was hurricane relief or something. It's not. But
Well, Feed Our Valley.
Feed Our Valley. I wasn't sure if we were dropping that yet, but
We've been
Feed Our
doing it for
Valley.
18
Yeah,
years. I think it's
know,
okay.
But so we have something that I'm designing now with our graphic guys where you can have the QR code and just like put your phone up if you want to go to the website and donate right there, and then, which is really cool. And we're doing a lot of different stuff like that and embracing technology.
So that convergence, that's interesting because we're already, you're right, we're already doing that. I'm talking about the way that we tell the stories in the 6, but you're right. This segment we're doing right here is not on air, but you'll watch it on, if you're watching it on YouTube, you're probably watching it on a television. This is broadcast, but this is not broadcast like we thought of it even 5 years ago.
No.
Our political panel segments that we do are now a half an hour long, but they air online, segment them on air. There's a lot of room for that. And so, I think I would agree with that that assessment that the need for it doesn't go away.
No, and I think news is always going to have a home. It's just how we can transform it.
People watch news more on streaming services now, certainly more than they did, a certain number of years ago.
Yes.
Meaning that it doesn't have to be appointment viewing anymore. So we have to keep evolving that way because the timing of it is less important depending upon how you consume it. If you're coming home from work and wanting to get the day's news, you're watching at 6 o'clock. Whereas if you're, say, a college student who keeps a different schedule, then there's topics you're looking for. And you might not be at home at 6 o'clock, but you still want the news. You still need the news.
Yeah.
Anything that we're not covering that people don't understand, just anytime you've ever, look, this is the opportunity. We talked about this. Every time anybody's ever not understood what it is you do, they'll listen to you for as long as you want right now.
I know. It's almost, and it's hard, like I said, to explain a visual media in just words. And like, because we have all of those tools to be able to show you what we do. But like you said, everything that we do has multiple steps to it that you might not realize that we're doing. You have a lot of different hats. You're like, okay, I have my journalism hat on. I have my artist hat on. I have my, storyteller, even just the text of how I'm writing something has to be economical, has to be short, but it has to be impactful. Like all of it's just kind of a juggling act.
And while you're saying that, I'm thinking about how it also has to be fair and not misleading accidentally. And so the video can completely change the context of what you're saying if it's chosen haphazardly. Even if it's video of the incident that you're talking about. I mean, if you're talking about a car accident and there's video of the accident, but in that video, there's a close-up of a business's sign. All of a sudden, you're not being fair or clear. So you need to know every frame of what's going to hit the air if you're really doing your job. As well as what's in the headlines and how to word those. I mean, there really is so much.
Down to the music. Because even today I had to write something that was, we are going to have an interview tomorrow on WFMJ Today talking about natural gas alarms and different devices to kind of detect natural gas leaks and things in your home. And recently we've had 2 big tragedies involving gas leaks. And it's like, I don't want this interview to come across as callous. I want it to be empathetic, but also informative to people. So how do I do that? Well, I do that with what the questions are, how I'm directing that interview, and, the bump, which is a little tease leading up to that interview before commercial break. I'm like, okay, I don't want any kind of graphic. I don't want anything flashy. I feel like that's not empathetic to the people that lost their lives. I want just a single anchor on camera. She's going to say, hey, this happened, and we're going to talk about ways in your own home to protect yourself if there's a leak. And they normally have music. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want that bouncy music. That's not appropriate. So I wrote in the notes, hey, somber music. Hey, don't take any graphics, stuff like that. Like the little nuances of everything that you see and hear on air is kind of what we have to do.
And that makes all the difference between the content of that interview that you just described could be exactly the same, but presented differently with the music or the graphics
Yes.
could
Yeah.
come off completely
Yes.
sensationalistic.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the viewer wouldn't really notice that that was why.
Mm-hmm.
They would just say, look at these vultures.
Yes. Yes. And you're like, and that's not what we do. You know, that's not what we're about. So you have to kind of, like I said, juggle a way to make it engaging, but to, you know, understand that we all do, that people are human. You know, you have to treat these stories as that first and foremost.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That brings us to the end of this week's The Outcue. As always, if there's anything you want us to look into, if there's anything, any story that you think that we should be telling that we haven't told, if there's any wrongdoing you think should be made right that we can help you with, you can reach us at 330-744-8821, news@wfmj.com, watchdog@wfmj.com, and you can always click like and subscribe to this video and follow our YouTube channel and follow us on social media and message us on Facebook. You can send up smoke signals. You can just don't show up here with a story. We're not going to just come down and talk to you. There are security concerns. But until then, we will see you next week. This has been The Outcue.